Canadians with loved ones in Cuba are watching the unrest in their country closely, many taking to the streets of Toronto over the past week, sharing stories about the struggles Cubans have endured and why these protests taking place now are important. Elizabeth Rodriguez is a Cuban-Canadian with family back home.
There's a lot of sadness involved. At the same time, there's a lot of pride that finally people are waking up.
Cuba has seen some of the largest anti-government protests in its history. Rodriguez says her 24-year-old brother has been participating in the uprising back home. But with widespread internet outages, she consistently worries for the safety of her family.
My brother was out in the protest the first day, and he told me that it was extremely scary because people that belong to the police, they were dressed as civilians. So they inserted the protesters, the peaceful protesters, and then they were shooting in the back.
Anti-government protesters have been demanding better access to basic necessities such as medicine and food. They're also protesting the government's COVID-19 response after crushing case numbers on the island. Many are now calling for political change.
What we're seeing now in Cuba, what we have been seeing over the last couple of months, is very much like the special period, but even exacerbated.
That was back in 1994, the last time Cuba saw an uprising of this magnitude following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Dr. Camille Hernandez Ramdwar is a professor of Caribbean studies. She says the story in Cuba continues to unfold, but the messaging about the true cause of the unrest may be muffled.
Because if the government's, just able to kind of squash or what they have always tended to do, which is suppress, right? Any kind of dissent. But at the same time, I would like to think that there is space for change in Cuba, okay? Because things are at a crisis point. Things are at a boiling point.
Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel has blamed the U.S. for the unrest, saying the embargo is to blame. The government organizing a pro-revolution protest just yesterday. But Cubans here in Canada say that isn't the case, taking to the streets here in Toronto, hoping for the Canadian government to get involved.
My wife, for example, is a refugee because she's from Cuba and she's running away from a dictatorship. So this country gives refugee status to Cubans because they're running away from a dictatorship. But at the same time, they don't recognize the dictatorship publicly. So it's a hypocrisy that I'm just tired of that. So the Cubans outside of Cuba are trying to bring awareness and talk about the real situation of Cuba.
People want to see humanitarian acts being put into place. This is what we're really talking about here, right? Let's stop the ideology. Let's stop the blockade. Let's stop talking about, whether you're supporting a revolution whose ideals maybe do not meet so much with younger Cubans today.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did comment on the protests late this week, saying, "We're deeply concerned by the violent crackdown on protests by the Cuban regime." Another local demonstration is set to take place tomorrow afternoon at Nathan Phillips Square.